I'd like to think of this theme as incredibly important one, because pawn structure generates the framework for every middle game, but also opening and endgame plan. Once you learn to read chess positions, that is to understand the pawn structure, you'll be able to find those good ideas and plans that from this perspective may look so strange and difficult. Now let's use the current situation on the board and start thinking what really matters and what would be a good plan for white here. There are a couple of things we may think of. One is based on the fact that this is an endgame, therefore the kings should be activated. Also, since there is a rook on the board, the one on f1, that is not doing anything, we may be thinking of making it better. Question is, what exactly we want to do with them? Is there anything to attack in the opponent's camp? What I have noticed teaching beginner level players is that they tend to attack what is not weak, and they end up just losing time and making things only worse. In this position, many would say that the target is the black's king, which is in fact completely safe. What's going to happen in that case is that white just puts pieces in an awkward way and soon regret it. Try to imagine a situation like this. Having two white rooks on the g file threatening the g7 pawn, and after black pushes this pawn to g6, we can see white rooks being completely misplaced on the king side, because there is nothing worth attacking there. Everything is solid in black's camp. Instead, we should have attacked black where they are the weakest. But what is it? Since we already eliminated black's king, and we can say that their rooks are also fine, we should probably look at their pawns. As you all know, those are the weakest pieces in chess, and they can't easily run away once being put under pressure. However, we saw that the one on g7 was fine even after we piled both of our rooks against it. So what was wrong with our idea of coordinated attack on the single g pawn? For sure, there is nothing wrong with our rooks. There must be something about their pawns. And seemingly that one on g6 was a rock solid one. And what made it so solid were those two pawns on f7 and h7. So how about targeting a pawn that wouldn't have such great defense? Please pause the video in case you cannot find that target immediately, while I'm going to proceed by describing it as an isolated pawn on a6. This target seems to be easy to attack. We can bring both of our rooks there on the a file. Let's do that this way. They're going to do the same thing, building defense on the same file. Incidentally, there is a tactical way to win that pawn, and if you want, you can again pause and try to find it. It is not difficult. We're using the fact that the a pawn is pinned and play simply the move for b5. The pawn is going to fall on the next move. Pay attention to our rook on the a5 square. It is blocking the targeted pawn from moving forward. If you'd imagine that rook standing one square lower into our camp, the a6 pawn, our target in other words, would be able to pass by our pawn and survive. Say we had this kind of situation with the rook standing on a4 instead. We push b5, they just pass by playing a5. It is known since Nimzowitsch that first thing to do when building pressure against a pawn is to immobilize it, which means create a blockade in front of it. That's exactly what we did here, playing the move rook a5. Finally, even if we wouldn't win the a6 pawn, say having no pawn on b4, that situation with our rooks attacking and black's rook defending a weak pawn is giving white kind of positional advantage, since you can move your rooks as white, if you want to of course, while black is forced to keep them passive no matter how much they would like to use them in a more active way. Our next position is showing how reasonable is picking the weakest thing in the opponent's camp when choosing a target. I feel like I don't even need to ask what's the best move after underlining the weaknesses of black. a7, c7, and c6 pawns. And the first to attack is going to be the one on c6. That pawn simply falls after the move rook c1. This means that when there are multiple weaknesses, we choose to attack that one that our opponent can't easily protect, while at the same time we can easily attack. Here we have the same pawn structure, but there are no rooks on the board, and it may be seen as an improvement for black because there are no pieces of white to take advantage of the black's weaknesses. However, white is still winning using the same technique. Put pressure against the main weakness, the c6 pawn. How to make it happen when the black's king is standing right there on d6. Say we make a neutral move such as moving our king to c4, waiting for black to do the damage to their own position. Playing, let's say, king e6, king c5, attacking the pawn, king d7, defending it. And here again, the same situation as before, the same motive to use. We'll go with the pawn move, this time with a4. Now we are gonna let them make their king's move and move away from the pawn, after which we just take the pawn on c6. And again, we can say, thanks to the weak pawns, white is winning, attacking only with their king this time. And here we have a completely different kind of damaged pawn formation in black's camp. There is no pawn, we can say, is weak, separated or left behind. Still, having those double pawns on the c-file makes their pawn majority less flexible and quite impotent when it comes to the idea of creating a passer on the queen side. Not being able to create a passer out of their pawn majority, black is practically playing position being down a pawn. Meanwhile, white is going to improve the king, but more importantly push the f and e pawns and create a passer which most likely leads to a winning position. Now let's see how white prevents black from creating a passer on the queen side. Say black opens with b5. We can do b3, and now whatever they do, let's say they play c5, we're just gonna go c4. If they push the pawn, they're going nowhere. These two pawns are being stopped by one of the whites. And if they capture here, we just recapture, and there it is. This pawn on c4 is worth basically two of those black's pawns. Now there are other ways black can try, but you should be able in any given version to stop them from creating a passer on the queen side. What all of that tells us about the middle game plan of both sides. We have a position which precedes the endgame we just saw. If we concluded that it is better for white, then trading pieces may be a good overall idea. On the other side, keeping pieces, avoiding to trade, may be part of the black's agenda. Let me ask you to guess the move, a possible plan for white, having in mind that endgame we just went through. You can pause the video and I'm gonna continue now. The truth is, we'd be happy to trade on e5, as we already said, in this given position, and after black recaptures, we can even try to make an offer to trade queens too. Note that here we are forming a plan in the opening phase while thinking about the possible endgame advantage. Finally, we are going to see another kind of weakness in one's pawn formation, but I'm not going to tell in advance. Instead, you can pause again and try to identify the weakness in the black's pawn structure. Also, you can name a weak square that one's pawn formation grants to the opponent in combination with a weak pawn. Okay, we call it a backward pawn. It comes together with a square weakness in front of it. In this case, it is going to be the d5 square and the d6 pawn. That pawn is weak because there is no pawn that can go back and support it. Simply, it is not legal. This pawn should be seen similarly the way we see isolated pawns. Remember, the isolated pawn is the one that cannot be guarded by another neighbor pawn. Only the pieces can help it. The square in front of it typically you can use to plant one of your minor pieces, but the best of which is having a knight on that post. That's also known as an outpost for your pieces, again because there is no black pawn that can chase your piece away. If you choose to attack the d6 pawn, you'd not make a mistake here. It is going to be done by bringing the heavy pieces to the d-file and building pressure slowly. At the right moment, the d5 knight is going to move away, and then the pawn is going to be possibly lost, or won on d6, depends what's your perspective. We can also add the other knight, which is not doing much at this point. In any case, the pawn on d6 is guiding us again through the middle game phase and helping a lot to know where our pieces belong. On the other side, black would like to get rid of their d6 weakness by pushing it and trading for the white's e4 pawn. However, it will be very difficult, if not impossible to do, as we have our knight dominating the board on d5. The possible logical line may be queen e2, knight a6. Queen e2 move is there because we want to bring one of the rooks to the d-file, but also we can go with knight a5, improving the knight quickly. Black plays rook a b8, and we go rook fd1. Bishop f8. Again, some other moves are possible. We're going to just demonstrate how this pressure is going to be built. Queen e6. The other rook is coming to d1. There is an obvious target, and we're going against the pawn on d6, without giving black any chance of getting rid of the weakness. Also, we may consider trading down to an endgame, but in that case we need to ask what pieces we'd like to keep and what are those that we are willing to trade. Let's think about it. For example, this situation is still with the black having that backward d6 pawn, but there are no white pieces that can ever attack it. Don't think of using your c4 pawn to push it and maybe attack the one on d6, because it's going to just end in trading these pawns. Therefore, this is an ideal situation for the one with the backward pawn, not that much for the one who's supposed to be attacking it. In this case, however, we still have pieces that can put pressure on the pawn, and that means we are still ahead in this endgame. Definitely, we'd know what to do. Pile up on the d file and attack the weakest pawn in the black's camp. We may even quickly profit from it. Say rook ad1, rook fd8, rook d5, rook d7, rook fd1, hitting the pawn for the second time, rook ad8 defending, and then using tactical motive called pin, try to win the pawn on d6, c5. So we're winning the pawn, same as in the first example. Well, I told you that this backward pawn can be seen same as those isolated pawns. Altogether, this example is supposed to illustrate how the structure tells you what you should target, showing you the best places for your pieces and overall the way you should be planning your middle game, but also endgames, even openings. If that's not enough to make you pay attention to the pawn structure, then probably these examples were not good enough. In any case, let me know what you think in the comment section.